From October 1973 till June 1974, the British rock band The Who toured the Americas and Europe promoting their sixth studio album, Quadrophenia. Pete Townshend, Keith Moon, John Entwistle, and Roger Daltrey worked really hard to deliver a rendition of their newest rock opera, mixing it with their characteristic crisp and aggressive sound and delivering an astounding live experience. Welcome back to Rock is Dead They Say, and today we'll continue the series with episode 3, the Quadrophenia Tour stage setup. But before we start, please click the subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss this channel's newest videos. And now let's start with the analysis. The Who always wanted to blow people's ears when the time of rocking on stage came. They continued doing so like they did on the Tommy or The Who's next tour. The technology used for this tour had turned a lot more complicated, and since the information available wasn't complete, I had to use the only info available and a bit of imagination. The stage experience for this tour has amazed audiences from a 40 or so cities, and because of that, we'll see in detail what makes this stage experience so special. For this episode, I'll separate the analysis in two bigger parts, the story behind the album and the staging it. The stage part will be separated in three different sections: lighting rig, PA system, and instruments and effects used in the tour. After the release and the promotional tour for Who's Next, the band spent most of 1972 in a touring hiatus, 8 months to be precise, and Pete took advantage of the situation, composing new songs for an album which would follow their last release. He learned the lessons from the aborted Livehouse sessions, but at the time thought that the band needed to make concept albums and rock operas, something that he called imprudent in recent years. The first song ever demoed that was used on the album was Drowned, which was composed in late 1970, with no concept developed yet, but it was shelved in the demo archives. He loosely started to conceive the idea of recording about the mod lifestyle in late 1971, but the concept never took off. However, this idea sat on the back of his mind for a while, and wasn't brought to the table until another musical project seemed improbable. Rock is Dead, Long Live Rock, a rock opera based on the band. Pete went to see Chris Stamp and Nick Cohn and vaguely explained the ideas behind his brand new concept, looking for advice and creative guidance. It even got to the point where Nick made a movie treatment of this concept, which contained the seeds of the Quadrophenia's concept. According to Pete, there's a section of 3 paragraphs of that script that cemented the road for the next album, and I quote, "I have created too much for a single film. Scenes run from anything between a second and several minutes, and put together could run for roughly 8 hours. Ideally, I would like them spread over 4 prints. Each of these prints would overlap with many sections, common to all, but they would be constructed with emphasis on the different members of the group in turn, the Who lived by Roger, then by Pete, and so on. Until it's decided whether such an approach is feasible, I have not been able to provide a formal structure, since 4 films in one would obviously need to be quite different to a single print. All that I could do, therefore, was to place the scenes in roughly chronological order, from childhood through the present. This may give some sense of progression, but should not be read as complete. Figure whom I have called Tommy. What he represents is not a character or activity but experience. He has no emotion and no desire. He simply looks on, passive but curious, and smart. In other words, he is a sort of universal receiver, a blender into which specific sensations are fed, mingled, and made general. Meanwhile, the concept for the album was being reviewed. Pete demoed a bunch of songs, and after a detailed analysis, Pete's idea mutated, and the concept was mixed with the mod's storyline, giving as a result the Quadrophenia album concept, meaning in a lot of songs being discarded, like Anymore, Wizardry, Ambition, Joker James, Get Out and Stay Out, Four Faces, and We Close Tonight, because of mood or storytelling conflicts. For these demos, Pete not only used a lot of his guitars, he also made an extensive use of his ARP 2500 synth, his drum kit, and even learned to play cello to a level that allowed him to record. The way he approached his demos mainly followed by the method he used for the Lifehouse project, a matrix of sonic textures. Pete took the composition and arrangement process so seriously that many of the recordings he did on his home studio ended in a final recording, and even in compositions like The Rock, Quadrophenia, Love, Rain or Me, and Helpless Dancer, he left the slots for Roger, Keith and John to record their parts on the studio. But before even thinking in recording of the album, Pete Townshend had the idea of building his own studio, which could support quadraphonic sound. He bought lands near Goring-on-Thames with that purpose, and so he did for a time. With his driver Rod Hoyson, he started bringing his equipment to the warehouses located on the land. But after a time, while talking with the band's tour manager, John Wolf, Pete expressed his concerns about the lack of space on the recording room, which he led him to the Road Cruise storage facility and the band's tape archive in Thessaly Road, Battersea. This turned out to be a very large church hall full of road gear, and Pete was so impressed with the hall size and acoustics that the studio equipment was moved there. 6 months later, on May 1973, the band started recording the album in a brand new studio, but this was only half equipped, so Pete decided to hire Ronnie Lane's mobile studio and use it to record the basic tracks until the work and acoustics in the control room were sorted out. The new studio was baptized as Rampart Studios and had enough equipment to record a basic track with a guide vocal simultaneously, and after a while, the new mixing console arrived, and the control room's equipment was finally completed. John spent most of the British summer overdubbing dozens of tracks with brass instruments, in most cases replacing Pete's synth tracks, adding a more symphonic atmosphere to the recordings. Pete wanted to add ambient recordings between the tracks, and to achieve that, he and the recording engineer, Ronnie Bison, went to several locations to record those field recordings. This included a whistling train near Pete's home, a musical excerpt from The Thunderer, a march by John Philip Sousa, which Bison recorded while watching a brass band play in Regent's Park, Sea Sounds recorded at Perranporth Beach, among others. Assembling those field recordings proved to be problematic, even at the point when there were 9 tape machines running sea noises for I Am the Sea. Although this new album meant a scattered and partialized recording assembly, there were still some band moments in the recording. For example, 515 was completely arranged by the band in the studio, as well as The Real Me, this last one including a bass part recorded in one take. For Love, Rain or Me, a bunch of percussion instruments were set up so Keith could play them along, and he kicked a kit of tubular bells on the song's finale, adding such intensity to the track that it was left in the final cut. Pete started mixing the album along with Bison in August 1973, leaving everything ready for its release, including the booklet photographs taken by Ethan Russell. Quadrophenia was released on October 26, 1973, and the setlist was this. After the writing and recording of the album, The Who focused on the live experience and started overseeing different aspects of the show, including the lighting rig. For this tour, Pete wanted to hire Chris Stanton as a touring keyboardist, but Roger strongly opposed the idea, saying that the band should perform as the core quartet they always been. This meant a major problem, because if the band wanted to perform the album entirely, as it was released not using an additional member, they would be forced to use backing tapes, like they did for Baba O'Reilly and Won't Get Full Again. To achieve that, Pete and Ron spent weeks assembling backing tracks on which the band would rely on. This proved to be a disastrous mistake, because the band allowed themselves only 2 days of rehearsal with the tapes, and one of them was cancelled due to a fight between Roger and Pete, on which the last one was sent to the hospital. More on that later. The band started day 2 in Stoke-on-Trent, UK, on October 28, 1973, and proved to be a disastrous performance once they reached the Quadrophenia set, and the band dropped immediately the dirty jobs, Is It In My Head, and I've Had Enough, never been performed live until the 1996 Quadrophenia Tour. The tour consisted of 41 concerts in the UK, USA, Canada and France between October of 1973 and June of 1974. The majority of the lights used in this stage were power lights with color gels beside them. Besides, there were rear spotlights, bought by the band in 1970, which added an intensity never tried before them. The band's lighting rig mutated with every tour's leg, and to make a complete analysis, I'll separate this section in 3, one subsection for each lighting rig iteration. The first iteration was composed of 4 structures, from which 76 lights were hung. This one was used for the first UK leg, and compared with the second and the third, it was quite precarious, consisting of a group of power lights besides the spotlights. Also, this one was the least documented leg of the tour, so, based in all the scarce multimedia material available, the first lighting iteration should be placed in this order. We can divide this section in 2, the rear lighting rig and the lighting towers. In the rear section, we have 44 lights pointing to the band. We'll divide this section in 2 groups. On the first one, we have 9 red lights, 8 blue lights, 8 green lights, 8 yellow lights, 3 magenta lights, and 4 white lights. On the second group, we have 4 spotlights. In the lighting towers, we have 32 lights in total, and they're separated into 4 white lights, 4 purple lights, 4 magenta lights, 4 green lights, 4 yellow lights, 4 turquoise lights, 4 red lights, and 4 blue lights. The second iteration was composed by 4 structures, from which 132 lights were hung. This one was used for the American and Canadian dates, and compared with the first and the third, it was the biggest one. Also, this one was the best documented leg of the tour. So, based in all the multimedia material available, the second lighting iteration should be placed in this order. We can divide this section into the rear lighting rig and the lighting towers. In the rear section, we have 84 lights pointing to the band. We'll divide this section in 2 groups. On the first one, we have 20 red lights, 20 blue lights, 20 green lights, and 20 yellow lights. On the second group, we have 4 spotlights. Besides, for most of the gigs, a fallout shelter sign designed by Bill McManus was hung. In the lighting towers, we have 48 lights in total, and they separated into 12 blue lights, 12 yellow lights, 8 red lights, 8 green lights, 4 magenta lights, and 4 purple lights. The third lighting iteration was composed by 4 separated lighting structures, from which 100 lights were hung. This one was used for the French dates. So, based in all the multimedia material available, the third lighting iteration should be placed in this order. We can divide this section in two, the rear lighting rig and the lighting towers. In the rear section we have 68 lights pointing to the van. We'll divide this section in two groups. On the first one we have 10 yellow lights, 6 magenta lights, 16 green lights, 16 blue lights, and 16 red lights. On the second group we have 4 spotlights. In the lighting towers we have 32 lights in total, and they're separated into 8 yellow lights, 6 blue lights, 6 green lights, 8 red lights, and 4 magenta lights. The van's PA system, as well as the lighting rig, grew exponentially for this tour. The band continued working with Heil Sound, which provided the band with sound equipment since the last tour. For this occasion, Pete contacted Bob Heil and presented him a challenge to build a quadrophonic PA system, a concept which Townsend embraced since the album conception and composition. Heil, a respected and renowned sound engineer at the time, said it was possible after thinking for a while, then referring to the additions the audio system would need to function perfect. Pete was happy to hear that, to which he replied, "You go build it, I'm gonna go write it." Bob Heil went to the USA to work on the idea, using as a template their current PA system, which was used on the previous tour. To capture the band's loud nature and to fulfill Townsend's vision, Heil added more cabinets and horns to the band's towering speaker configuration, and more amps, which added even more loudness to the ensemble. The final ensemble was presented to the band, and they used it for their rehearsals and the tour dates. This new PA included 32 front-loaded bass cabinets, each one with JBL 2205 15-inch speakers, 32 radial horns with JBL 2482 drivers, 6 radial horns with JBL 2420 super high compression drivers, 4 mid to high frequency long throw horns with JBL 2440 drivers, 32 JBL 2405 high frequency tweeters, 12 Sound Coliseum slave amps, 4 Heil throughs, a combination of a front and rear loaded cabinets with 2 Heil 12-inch woofer tweeters in each one, 4 16-foot folded horns, 6 Heil PFLs, each with JBL 2205 1 per 15-inch speakers, 4 Crown DC 308 amps, 12 Sun W 1 per 18-inch PA bins. To capture the band's sound and derive it to the PA system, a powerful console had to be hired. The band contacted the IES Sound Company, and they presented the Mavis desk. The Mavis, acronym for Musical Augmentation Voicing Instrumentation System, the band used included 30-channel inputs, which allowed to pick every sound the band made individually, mix it, and send it to the massive PA system. Besides, the band used a tape machine to play the intricate synth parts for most of the songs. In this case, the band used a Scully 284 tracks tape machine, which was connected to the mixing desk. This tour featured new instruments and new amp stacks, which transformed the already aggressive sound the band made. To make a complete analysis for the band's live sound, I've separated this section in 4, one subsection for each band member. Keith's drum kit grew even more for this tour. Besides all the tones, snare, bass drum, he added an extra gong, an extra row of toms, and a timpani. This setup was displayed in 2 finishes, black and polychromatic gold. All his drums were premier. All his cymbals were pasty 2002, and the final kit was like this, which included two 22-inch per 14-inch bass drums, 13-inch per 9-inch, 14-inch per 10-inch, 15-inch per 12-inch, and 16-inch per 16-inch concert toms, 3 14-inch per 8-inch mounted toms, 16-inch per 16-inch and 18-inch per 16-inch floor toms, a 5.5-inch per 14-inch snare drum, a 22-inch timpani, two 20-inch ride cymbals, an 18-inch crash cymbal, a 20-inch crash cymbal, 14-inch hi-hat cymbals, 30-inch and 36-inch symphonic gongs, a pair of clavis, As always, Roger didn't use any instruments on this tour, with the exception of two tambourines and his Horner harmonica. His trademark microphone with gaffer tape was his trustworthy Shure Model 565D Unisphere 1, which gave him the power needed to project a strong and deep voice like Daltrey's. Pete's guitars were completely changed to achieve new sonic textures. The most notable transformation was the change between the Gibson SG and the Gibson Les Paul as main instrument. Those guitars were a Gibson SG Special with Polaris white finish, a Gretsch 6128 Duojet, a Gibson Les Paul Standard, a Gibson Les Paul Custom, 8 Gibson Les Paul Deluxe guitars with cherry sunburst and golden finishes. Now I'm going to talk about the change that formed between the guitar jack and the PA system, starting with the stomp box he had, which was a Univox superfast pedal. Pete used a stack of amps and cabinets to maximize the volume of his instruments, where we have two high-watt CP103 amp heads, a high-watt DR103W amp head, 4 high-watt cabinets SE4123, a junction box for the guitar amps. Besides, there were 2 stacks of cabinets for Keith and for Johnny for monitoring purposes. John's gear was further expanded for this tour, which meant changing his main instrument and adding more amps and cabinets to his stack. Dissatisfied with the Thunderbird's thin neck, he went to see Peter Cook and asked him to join the body and electronics of a Thunderbird with a Fender Precision bass blonde neck. To achieve that, Cook had to make a new body for the instrument, slightly thicker, made from mahogany. The joint between the body and the neck was a standard Fender junction, which was a bolted joint. A few basses were made for him, with salmon and black finishes. Besides, he carried a few Thunderbirds as spare bass and 2 effects pedals, a Boss C1 chorus effect and a MXR Dynacom. He also toured with a flugelhorn, on which the brass line for Helpless Dancer was played. The amps he used were a Sound Coliseum lead bass amp, a Sound Coliseum slave power amp, a Sound Coliseum 880 amp head, a Sound Coliseum bass amp head, 2 Son 4x12-inch cabinets, 2 Son 3x12-inch cabinets, 2 Son 1x18-inch cabinets, 2 Son W1x18-inch PA bins. His amps suffer a modification for the June 1974 date, and his setup for those dates are a Sound Coliseum lead bass amp, a Sound Coliseum slave power amp, 2 Son Coliseum bass amp heads, 2 Son 4 per 12-inch cabinets, 2 Son 3 per 12-inch cabinets, 2 Son 1 per 18-inch cabinets, and 2 Son W 1 per 18-inch PA bins. John had 2 Son W 1 per 18-inch PA bins for Pete and for Keith for monitoring purposes. The OPEC oil embargo was a crucial problem which affected the album's stock, eventually leading to several weeks of waiting just to get a copy. On October 4, 1973, the band performed on the BBC's TV show Top of the Pops, presenting their new single 515, but Pete's and Keith's mischievous behavior earned the band an 8-year ban on the show. The single was released the very next day. On November 5, 1973, the band was performing at the Newcastle Odeon when the backing track for 515 came coincidentally 15 seconds late. This got on Pete's nerves, who started smashing the tape console, the backing tracks, and even grabbed Bob Pridden by the neck of his shirt, shouting obscenities at him. Then he smashed his Gibson Les Paul Custom, tumbled his amps, and then stormed off the stage, leaving the band and the audience totally baffled. Although the band returned to play, versions from here differ. Some people claim the band played a medley of all songs, while other people assure that the band played a 10-minute version of Sea and Sand. The first date of the Fallout Shelter leg on November 20, 1973, was marked by problems as well. Besides the common tape problems, a fan offered Keith Moon horse tranquilizers, which he mixed with brandy. During the performance, Moon's playing became erratic, things noticeable on the Quadrophenia set, on which Keith barely could be on time. During Won't Get Full Again, Keith passed out over his drum kit, and after a cortisone injection, he was sent back to his drum kit. But during Magic Boss, he passed out again. The roadies picked him up again and rushed him to the hospital. Pete asked for a drummer in the audience, a call responded by Scott Halpin, who played with the band for their last 3 songs, Smokestack Lightning, Spoonful, and Naked Eye. After the gig in Montreal on December 2, 1973, the band attended an after-party show put on by RCA executives, which led into total chaos and destruction. The band and 12 staff members ended up arrested, and after a $6,000 fine to cover the damages paid the next day, the band was released. On a side note, John Entwistle used this event to write the lyrics for Cell No. 7, included on his 1975 album, Mad Dog. On their gigs at the Edmonton Sundown on late December 1973, polystyrene snowballs were thrown into the audience at the end of their shows. On the Paris gig played on February 10, 1974, the band was 3 songs into the setlist when a transformer blew up and the PA system was shut down, leaving a cloud of smoke. The gig was resumed 15 minutes later. Although the band started the tour playing most of the album, by the end of it, no more than 4 songs were played each gig. During the band's rehearsals at Shepperton Studios, Pete and Roger had a severe argument. A really drunk Townsend started shouting obscenities at Roger and hit him with his guitar's neck. Roger answered with a single uppercut punch on Pete's jaw, knocking him out cold and hitting his head in the process. He was rushed to the hospital, while Daltrey, thinking he had killed him, was racked with guilt. As well as what happened with Tommy, Quadrophenia made its way onto the big screen, coincidentally when there was a mod revival movement. The band didn't make Quadrophenia an essential part of their live repertoire again until the 1996 revival tour, 22 years after their last rendition. The album reached number 2 on the Billboard album chart that year, only surpassed by Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. At the time of release of this video, The Who hadn't released a full live recording of this tour, only a few songs from the Philadelphia gig in albums like View from a Backstage Pass and Greatest Hits Live. However, plenty of bootlegs has been traded over the years, with varying listening quality. Roger didn't express his disgust with the album until it was released. On a regular gig, Pete had to change guitars over 20 times. But what did we learn on this occasion? That this tour succeeded when we talk about the band keeping the raw energy it was characterized by, but, however, keeping the band together, composing a highly ambitious record, bringing it to the stage proved to be extremely difficult for Pete. However, the band learned from his mistakes and used all that experience when we talk about their next tour, supporting The Who by numbers. So, thanks a lot for watching this video, and while I make the other stage videos, just keep watching the rest of the series and the content in my channel. If you have a suggestion for a stage tour analysis, just let me know. I'll make it for you and I'll put you on the credits. Please join to my Facebook, Twitter and Instagram accounts, and follow all these projects while they're in the creation phase. See you next time and have a great day.